Sit back and throw one back with your pinky in the air and a middle finger to the world and join me, the eclectic gentleman Stephen Watts, as we look back on this day in pro wrestling history. But before we do, put that drink down, like, share, and subscribe, and without further ado, let's get our wrestling history on. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it is June 11th, and we're going to start off as we always do on a positive note. That's right, these are your pro wrestling birthdays. 1926, former wrestler and promoter of Hawaii, Ed Francis. 1959, the biggest what-if in professional wrestling, Magnum TA. 1963, journeyman wrestler for the WWF and WCW, Mike Enos. 1965, the original Mascarita Sangrada. Of course, on the flip side of that coin, your pro wrestling deaths for June 11th. 1976, legendary promoter, Toots Mondt. 2015, the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Alright, enough of the sad stuff. It's time to get to the meat and potatoes. That's right, these are your pro wrestling history highlights for June 11th. Jumping in the Wayback Machine and going all the way to 1879, where we see H.M. Duffer defeat James Owens in Boston, Massachusetts to win the American Collar and Elbow title. Owens still claimed the championship despite losing to William Muldoon on February 6, 1877. Hitting super fast forward and going all the way to 1954, where we see Ed Francis defeat Enrique Guzman for the NWA Texas Heavyweight title in Houston, Texas. The next year in 1955, Doug Donovan and Ivan Kamenkov defeat Luther Lindsay and George Dussett to win the Pacific Northwest Tag Team titles. Grooving into the 60s, 1965, Wilbur Snyder and Dick the Bruiser win the World Wrestling Association Tag Team titles for a third time, defeating the Assassins, Guy Mitchell and Joe Tommaso, ending their second reign. Grabbing my bell bottoms and going to the 70s, 1971, another set of Assassins, this time Tom Renesto and Jody Hamilton, win their 7th NWA Georgia Tag Team titles, defeating Ray Gunkel and El Mongol in Atlanta, Georgia by reverse decision. Jumping ahead 2 years to 1973, El Marquez defeats Karloff Lagarde for the Mexico National Welterweight title in Mexico City, Mexico. Our last stop in the 70s, 1975, Gene and Ole Anderson defeat Wahoo McDaniel and Paul Jones to win the Mid-Atlantic version of the NWA World Tag Team titles in Raleigh, North Carolina, beginning their second reign. Grabbing my boombox and going to 1980, where we see Alan Dennison defeat Jim Breeks for the British welterweight title in London, England, ending Breeks' 5th reign. Leaping 4 years to 1984, Rick Rude defeats Jerry Lawler to win the AWA Southern Heavyweight title in Memphis, Tennessee, ending Lawler's 30th reign of 5,675. Our last stop in the 80s, 1989, the Nasty Boys, Brian Knobbs and Jerry Sags, defeat the Southern Force, Black Bart and Tony Anthony, in Orlando, Florida, to win their 3rd NWA Florida Tag Team titles. Grabbing my flannel and going to the decade of grunge, 1993, Tracy Smothers defeats Tony Anthony to win the held-up Smoky Mountain Wrestling Heavyweight title in Knoxville, Tennessee. The title was held up on May 15th in Johnson City, Tennessee, after a match between the two. This began Smothers' second reign. And last but not least, 1998, WCW holds the 3rd annual Elio DiPaolo Memorial event in Buffalo, New York at the War Memorial Auditorium. Many wrestling legends were introduced at the opening of the show. Those in attendance were Dick Beyer, Gene Brito, Willie Farkas, Billy Red Lyons, Tony Marino, Angelo Poffo, George Scott, Lou Thez, Waldo Von Erich, and Kurt Von Hess. Those were your short but sweet pro wrestling history highlights for June 11th. I'm the eclectic gentleman Stephen Watts, and we'll see you tomorrow.